Neurofeedback is a way to train the brain to function at a more optimal state. Neurofeedback is not only used for optimal performance by a lot of professional athletes, including Olympic competitors and so on, or people who are functioning at have to function at a high intellectual level, Fortune 500 executives using neurofeedback. But it's also a very effective way to treat many of the kinds of things that bring people to my kind of setting, people with various kinds of issues like anxiety, migraine, addiction, depression, mood kinds of issues. So it's a very powerful way to treat migraine in a more comprehensive way. We have equipment which is similar to equipment you get in a hospital. It's called an EEG amplifier. EEG stands for electroencephalogram. And basically what they'd be doing is measuring your brain waves. Brain runs on its own electrical activity. So we use that same equipment. The only thing is we use it to train the brain. The amplifier feeds information into computer software, which I manipulate. The computer software is comparing your brain to a group of brains of people your age and sex, and looking at where there are significant abnormalities, where you might have high levels of arousal or not enough brain activity or electrical activity. And then I am manipulating the settings, and the software then, through some speakers and through a TV monitor, is giving your brain feedback. And it comes in the form of sounds and visual manipulation of a movie, basically. So your brain is getting information about how to move itself to a calmer, more focused state. One of the main reasons I've come to use neurofeedback for migraine is, first of all, I had dramatic results in reduction of migraine, almost elimination of very severe migraine condition, soon after I began using it on myself at a training session. But more importantly, migraine is a condition that isn't just about a headache. The headache is the final result of a whole bunch of things that have gone on with the brain. And sometimes people aren't aware, but they're having symptoms before the actual headache finally arrives. And many of us get what's called an aura, where we lose some eyesight, which is related to what's happening with the brain. But also, there's a period where we become hyper excitable, or hyper aroused, if you will. Those kinds of words make sense. You also become highly sensitive to light, highly sensitive to sound, and those things become unpleasant. Begin to have some gastrointestinal problems, typically. And then the headache hits. And the headache is often very profound and in the front and very focused. And along with the headache often comes then severe nausea and more intestinal problems. And also the person starts to feel in a very depressed state, because the brain has shifted from that excitability to depression. The brain is trying to get back to a place of stability. So neurofeedback treats as a preventative. In other words, it keeps the brain regulated so that you don't get the attacks. But if you do get an attack, it is a way for the brain to quickly begin to re-regulate itself so that you don't get repetitive attacks over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days. And it's very common for people to have bouts of migraine that last multiple days. And I can say, again, in my case, if I get a migraine and I treat it immediately with neurofeedback, I do not get the second day residual and the third day and the fourth day. And I'm back able to function typically within 24 hours without any untoward side effects. The primary reason you might consider neurofeedback over medication is that the reality is that all medications of the type that will be prescribed to you will have significant side effects. So it's a trade-off. One of the reasons I got into neurofeedback is in working with not only migraine, but with addiction, with trauma, with depression, with anxiety. Many times people come to me because they're having a hard time being on the medication. They don't like the side effects, and in many cases the side effects are really dramatic. When we stabilize the brain, it typically does not need medication. And unfortunately, there's a lot of over-medicating that goes on because folks are trained to do that and they don't know that there's an alternative. So that is the major reason that I see people coming here for migraine treatment with neurofeedback. But beyond that, what they discover once they start the neurofeedback is that they typically are symptom-free pretty quickly. Or we're cutting down the migraine attacks by 90%. So beyond the medication issue, there are added benefits to neurofeedback because neurofeedback is looking at the brain as a whole system, and it starts to make the brain more functional, period, more adaptive. So people sleep better, people feel less anxious, people are in a better mood, and they begin to be more regulated in all kinds of ways. So unlike medication, the side effects of neurofeedback, typically if there are any negative side effects, they're minor, a little bit of discomfort, emotional discomfort, a little bit of sleep disturbance perhaps, and they're gone within 24 hours. And as most people know, there's many short-term dramatic side effects to medications, and there are long-term permanent side effects to some medications. You'll know it's working almost immediately. And one of two things typically happens. The headaches and the attacks, the migraine attacks, stop. Or they lessen in frequency, and they certainly lessen in intensity. A neurofeedback session will typically be 30 minutes. The frequency should be a minimum of once a week. Twice a week in the beginning can be very helpful, but it's not necessary. Total number of sessions is individualized. As the migraines begin to become less intense and less frequent, we start making the treatment less frequent until we reach the point where we've eliminated the migraine.